Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the War Report. I'm pleased to announce I have a new setup. So, technical difficulties, they aren't going to go away completely, but they should be a lot less from this point forward. I actually have a competent computer to record this on. So, without further ado, let's get into the news topics of this past week. I say the story we should start with is Trump's diagnosis, hospitalization, and release from hospital due to him catching the coronavirus. Now, it was last week after the debate. In fact, I think because we're recording right now on Wednesday the 7th, I believe it was exactly a week ago when we heard news of the diagnosis. And then he was taken to Walter Reed Hospital, stayed there for about 4 days, him and Melania, and he was released with. It was a pretty mild case. He looked just a little under the weather. At, and it didn't look like he was on the verge of death. Keep in mind, this is like a 74-year-old obese man. I mean, Trump, he has a lot of stamina. He seems very high energy, but again, he also is an old fat man at the end of the day. We have to remember that. And he pulled his way out of this. I think he actually fared better than Boris Johnson did, who's about 10 years younger than him, and like 10, 15 years younger than him, I think. I think he's like in his late 50s. And he fared a lot worse with this, and again, there's other extenuating circumstances that could lead to that. And what we have with that is again, I think it shows. I know Donald Trump, of course, being the president, has access to the greatest healthcare in the world, but I think it also shows maybe it's not as deadly as we thought. If somebody like that can fare pretty well because of it. But I want to talk more about the reaction to him catching it. Now, I'm not. I imagine you all know at this point. I'm not a diehard Trump supporter. I'm not even necessarily a Trump fan. I will give him credit where credit is due, and overall, what we have is just an ultimate reaction to him getting sick, people hoping for his death, which I think is very unhealthy, despite what you think of the man, for the stability of the Republican, shows just how divided the country has become, especially right before election. They hope he just croaks because that is how much of an aberration he is to this republic, rather than wanting to vote him out. Now, of course, they're going to do the, oh, we're civil, we're going to morally grandstand. I can't believe you mocked the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg while laughing at Trump. And again, the hypocrisy, I know it's not an argument, but it's very interesting that these people have no standards beyond double standards. And again, just the same tired talking points I could make over and over.
Yeah, well, I mean, as we were saying off air, and I agree with you that ultimately it is bad news for the Republic when the division is this bad, unless you're an accelerationist. But basically, the illusion on the
I
right
mean, it must have
is
been a
that
wonderful early birthday present for Mr. Vladimir Putin, which today he is 68 years old. So, just a
that's right.
fun fact that.
Yeah, but just as I was talking to you off air, the illusion on the right is that America can be saved or a previous America can be restored. And the illusion on the left is that America can be united if we just got rid of this orange dude.
Yeah,
And
Biden will get us all on the White House lawn. We'll smoke some pot, and I'll sing John Lennon's "Imagine" in Esperanto.
right, and of course, Biden owns a dog, except this one hasn't fallen off a balcony and died.
Oh no.
But all humor aside, um, it was interesting. I mean, you saw some efforts from the libs, basically saying that you can't just wish somebody's death. It's wrong, and of course you had the flip side who were ecstatic that maybe this time Trump could be wiped out. In a sense, COVID became another, not just another indictment against Trump, but it became um, an impeachment process, if you will. Mother Nature is impeaching Trump. His lack of seriousness towards the COVID response, which was contradictory and not always that serious. Uh, it has to be said. In some ways, it was a wish, basically, that um, that Mother Nature herself would indict and impeach Trump.
Yeah, and especially considering the fact you had a bunch of the really occultic, the really witch LARPer crowd, like, oh, we can cast spells with our crystals, sort of white women. I think you know the exact ones I'm talking about that were hexing
Yeah,
Trump using actually like Aramaic or the Ethiopian language while casting these curses or whatever.
that
I don't know. I mean,
was bizarre. I visited some of those accounts, and it's just absolutely bizarre, weird shit. Uh, like really ugly scenes of corpses and decapitated heads, and just absolute bizarre world.
yeah, and I do have probably the most important thing we can say out of all this is we finally came to a verdict on how serious Trump was when it came to uh, suggesting that Assad should be assassinated. Because if he was 100% serious, he would have succumbed to this. Therefore, he did not invoke the Assad curse because he said it in an offhand remark. I mean, that's honestly the most important takeaway we can make from all this because he had his brush with death and he survived it. Trump tangos with death. There we go. We have the episode title. Trump tangos with the Reaper. Even better. But
Well, yeah, Nick Land said something to the same effect. He said, "COVID is not in the room with Trump. Trump is in the room with COVID."
and then probably the second part of this saga was Trump's return to the White House, and they made a very nicely edited, nicely shot video of him landing on the presidential helicopter, walking to the balcony, taking off his mask, and saying triumphantly before a crowd of people at the White House. And of course, people said, "This is like fascism. This is like when Mussolini did, whatever." And honestly, what you have there, it's easy to make fun. I made fun of it myself. Apparently, balconies are authoritarian, and the more balconies you have, the more authoritarian you are. I mean, what if he like just stepped on the balcony on top of that one? I mean, would that have made him like ultra Mussolini? I don't know. Would his like chin would have like just protruded to the yeah you know what I'm going with this, but honestly, I think what they saw there was at least a president, an American president that was a mildly right wing white guy showing any degree of strength at all was enough to send them over the edge. And I think that's been the thing about Trump. He hasn't been impressive that much policy wise. Rhetorically, it's been a mixed bag. But just the fact that he is a relatively normal white dude, from an upper class background, admittedly, showing a position of strength, showing like, oh, I overcame this virus, taking off his mask triumphantly and saying, we don't need to live in fear anymore. I think that simple enough fact sent them into a tailspin.
Right, and Trump really, right from the beginning, on some level, let's say there's three levels. One level is his pretty dicey remarks,
Wait,
that
three
in
balconies,
the
perhaps?
what's that?
Three balconies, perhaps?
Yeah. So, Trump on the campaign, gives some nods and winks to the dissident right, uh, speaks unfavorably about illegal border crossings, and but he has said certain things like shithole countries, and so that's one level. Another is sometimes he's unarguably incompetent. And then there's this, and sorry, the third point is as you mentioned. Pardon me, I don't know where these coughs are coming from.
Have
So
you
the
been
third
spending any
point,
time with the President of the United States lately?
that's right. So the third point is that, as you say, just him being, a white president post Obama is an abomination to a lot of people. um, like it or not, Obama made people forget about the missteps in the Middle East that were caused by, the Bush administration, and and in a way they could forget about anything else that Obama added to whatever atrocities America was committing in the Middle East, what other, what more ridiculous amounts of spending. So all of that could be forgotten, and the shift went very domestic. And I think after Obama left office, there was, of course, there was the idea that, of course, America was going to have its first female president, and that Bush Jr. actually represented the end of white males ruling America.
And what a better poster boy for the evil white man than George W. Bush, especially with the perception liberals had of him in the 2000 being. I mean, of course, every president since Clinton has been compared to Hitler or fascism or whatever by pretty much everyone in
Reagan
the
was
political.
compared to Hitler.
Yeah,
Uh,
it started. Yeah, it was very 80s phenomenon. About 30, 40 years after the war, that's when that started to pick up. I would say post Nixon, when people really lost faith in the institution of the president of the United States, is when that those sort of comparisons picked up. But you had that. You had Bush, who was allegedly this crazy theocratic guy who was going to turn the United States into a evangelical theocracy, who was bombing half the Middle East, which criticisms are valid at least on that one, in my opinion. And all these other things, trickle down economics. He only cares about the rich, economic policy. So he was the perfect poster boy for like, this is why we must dethrone the patriarchal WASP elite and put in a kind, humble black man, and then bring in some strong, empowered women, etc. That's what they had going there. And then of course Donald Trump, even though despite what his policy would have been, whether he would have fulfilled all his campaign promises, whether he would have governed as a complete neoconservative, which I think we've been spared from that at least, he being a bombastic white guy is still enough to shatter that narrative.
right, right, and I don't, of course, him being white is a part of the reaction, but it is also, it does come down to the way he's conducted himself. Not that that bothered me. I thought it was hilarious, but if I'm going to be as neutral as possible, and maybe give the lib point of view, a fair shake, then that's the way they see it, and they do have some points to some degree. So yeah, that he, like, if someone like Romney had gotten elected, if any of the Rhino Republicans had gotten elected, to be sure, they would have received similar criticism, but it would not have been the kind of obsession and intensity. I mean, we're living in an age where, like, it's obvious that newsrooms are now like activist rooms. The country is absolutely divided, and they act as if like Trump achieved something. Uh, you know, People unironically, putting timeline graphs of how Trump is going to take over the republic, just the way Hitler did.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on those on that wall and those deportations. But hey, I guess I'll have to wait 4 more years. Yeah, but that's okay because fascism is a time that it's a process that takes time. This is
Oh,
just how Hitler did it. Hitler, kicked the can down the road, hemmed and hawed for about I don't know 8 years before actually doing anything. Yeah, because that's fascism for you. But to touch on your point about people like Romney and McCain and Ryan, they would have been viewed as aberrations or minor setbacks. Like, oh, they're not quite ready for it yet, so we'll have to give some criticism, some finger wagging about how bad Romney is, despite being this center right and even arguably center left Republican. You look at his policies as governor of Massachusetts, etc. But somebody like Donald Trump, somebody who represents what he represents, was viewed as an outright rejection by the people pushing these narratives. Even, like I said, just in rhetoric. It's more about the people Trump purports to represent than what he actually does represent or what he does in actions.
right, right. So, yeah. So we saw, I mean, it's really never ending. It seems like almost every week there's something that he does that has thrown them in a spin. They're in a complete meltdown. Um, I mean, I think a lot of them understand that he's not dangerous. He can't really achieve anything. And as you said, it is about his base, not him. It is about how he encourages white America. And I mean, the truth is that they don't really understand. I mean, some of them have an inkling how disempowered they are and what is really in waiting for them in the next 10 to 20 years. Some of them do absolutely get that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, in
Um,
my opinion, a lot of the anti-Trump stuff stems from two places. Now, the general anti-Trump stuff stems from demoralizing white middle America, the sort of people that voted for Trump, the sort of people that go to his rallies. Those are the people that have no place in this new future America that's liberal and progressive, and we all, again, smoke pot and sing John Lennon's Imagine Esperanto. It's about that. And I would say point two, especially with a lot of the Rushgate stuff, which is allegedly getting declassified soon, goes back to Khodorkovsky and, of course, the entire desire for a new Cold War and a desire for the absolute finalization of the liberal world order. So, but again, I'd say it mainly goes in the first point, whereas especially now at the end of the Russia investigation, the end of the Rush hoax, the Khodorkovsky stuff is more of a secondary role.
yeah, that is true, and that is always a persistent thing in the background that feeds a lot of, real, frankly, a lot of the news when there isn't news, when there isn't something that Trump has said that has thrown them off or has angered them. Um, so it's always something that they can fall back on. Um, I mean, but obviously now we know that they did it because they just simply could not afford to have him in office, and we've discussed this many times. And the reason for that is it shows a kind of schizophrenic policy on America. How could they be, on the one hand, this progressive nation that is there to protect liberal democracies around the world, and essentially lead the Western world, but and also a global empire, and at the same time have this very nation centric guy who sometimes will throw a bone to natalists. Um, that was a contradiction that they couldn't afford, and that's really where the problem is. How people react to it uh, isn't them completely interfacing with what we're talking about. For them, it has to receive a kind of personal, anecdotal, a kind of domestic messaging, right, about their lives under him. Um, there isn't really like they've lost nothing. They've only had this big bumbling guy in their living room, which and their living room is the White House, who won't leave, and there's nothing they can do about it. But everything else is running more or less the way they would have had preferred, right? They want to acknowledge that, of course, but
Yeah,
if they
policy wise, it's a minor setback, but in terms of narrative and getting the people to go along with what they want to do, it's actually been pretty substantial.
right, all the talk of all the kind of things that people joked around about 5 years ago with trannies and um, gay agenda, toxic feminism, and all of that. Like that's over, and I mean, all those YouTube channels that sprung up, all the grifting and everything, that's over. I mean, some of it was very genuine. I mean, a lot of it was very genuine, but the left won that culture war, and complaining about it, obviously didn't achieve anything, um, because that's we're not in power. We don't have any institutional power. We don't have any oligarch that supports us. So yes, corporate America is not going to back us.
Well,
Uh,
I just got word from Viktor Orban this week, and that may be changing soon. But hey, continue.
yeah. So you know, these sort of these messages that Trump is putting out there from his visit at the Walter Reed Center, coming back to the White House. Yeah, it is for his base. Yes, he does want to be reelected, and a lot of people feel that he ought to be reelected. Um, a lot of people sincerely believe that if he's reelected, um, he's going to do something about the riots. And I hate to break it to people, he's not. Whether he wants to or not is not really the question. Is the question is, can he? And he can't. He can't, and he won't. Um, Now, from an accelerationist point of view, that's awesome. Because, of course, the governors and um, mayors of these towns, I don't think are going to switch policies. Um, they may even want to, but I don't think it's possible. Um, they simply cannot afford to give an inch to the right, and especially to the right, as it is, portrayed by Trump supporters. Um, yeah, so that's. I mean, I don't have much else to add to that. He looked a little bit sick on the balcony. That's true. He wasn't completely himself, and he's tried this new drug, Regeneron or something. The pieces are quite hilarious,
You
actually,
mean the
right?
stuff that's like made out of foreskins, I assume?
Yeah, that's right. So he's it's going to be interesting to see how this helps him. It will help him, but I don't think we're looking at more than 2 or 3 percentage points for tops.
Yeah, this isn't exactly Bolsonaro surviving a stab wound, which I think
Yeah.
probably tipped him over in Brazil. This is him catching a disease, which is, I would say, pretty widespread in the American public right now. And I would say, to bring it all around, to tie up what you said, with the schizophrenia of the Trump administration, of the United States government currently, I think the response to the virus is really what put that in front of the average American people. Because before that, it was a lot of geopolitical stuff. It was, what do we do in Syria? What do we do with Iran? What's our approach to Russia and China going to be like? You saw the schizophrenia there. But when it finally got home with the response to the virus, early on the Republicans were the hardliners on this, saying we need to shut down travel, we need to get serious about this, we need to prepare for a massive pandemic. And you had people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer saying, "Oh no, don't worry about it. It's fine. Go to Chinatown. Go out and enjoy the city, whatever." And then around March, when it got
Blasio said the
serious,
same thing about the Italian Film Festival.
yeah, yeah, and
Lots of them did. Lots of them did.
yeah. And then as it got more serious in March, there was an inverse where the Democrats really picked up what the Republicans dropped, and they were the ones very serious about the lockdowns, the shutdowns, the masks, all the other regulations. Where Trump was like, "It's no more deadly than the flu." And then that's the paradigm we're in now, but we're seeing the virus again nowhere near what it was in the spring. So it just shows there was no coherent, unified response by the federal government, by the state governments, or even within the federal government, to the point where the American people got to realize that schizophrenia. I would say the biggest thing about the American response to the virus wasn't that we did shut down, didn't shut down, that there was no coherent policy. For example, if we would have left it open and been like Sweden, the death rate probably would have been higher just because of other factors, but that would have been a coherent policy. If we would have done what China or Italy did and did complete lockdown, uh, nobody goes out unless they absolutely have to, that would have been a coherent policy. But I think a lot of the reasons it's dragged on so long is because there's no coherent policy on it. And I doubt there's going to be one anytime soon, even if Biden gets elected, because you'll have a lot of Republican governors, a lot of Republican state holdouts. And eventually, as much as the Democrats have played this for politics, there's going to get to a point where a subset of the Democrats have enough of this too and start to rebel against the party line. At least I think so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in a sense, COVID revealed two um, contradictions within America. On the one hand, you have the perennial contradiction, and that is like America is an empire; it's a financial empire. This disease comes along and it disrupts trade. It disrupts, the oil trade, of which the American dollar depends on, right? Because once America dislodged itself from the gold reserve because it had amassed for several reasons, but one is it amassed so much debt fighting in Vietnam that it made sense to go to oil, and then oil in itself. This, in a sense, really accelerated neoliberalism because it gave banks huge amount of power. There was all kinds of deregulation to make sure that this happened. So the switch had to go to oil. That creates a very powerful bank, banks and very like powerful, financial reserves, let's say, right? So you see a kind of a weakening of the government and the strengthening of corporations that took place, and this pandemic basically interrupts that, right? The other sort of seasonal or ongoing contradiction in America was that these whole 4 years was about we have got to get more illegal migrants into this country. We cannot afford to have another Trump down the road, or even Trump getting reelected. And this is why you saw Democrats initially saying this is just the flu, don't worry about it. Because, if it's not, well, then you have to change your policy about that. And you saw all those, video footages of these caravans coming up from Central America, a lot of them from Nicaragua. By the way, that Hillary Clinton is responsible for disrupting in the first place, um, for funding a war there that literally never got any press coverage.
Yeah, that was
So
Honduras in 2009. They
yes,
overturned the election, which led to a not a full out civil war, but pretty much just again a fourth generation civil war where it's on and off fighting constantly. People are leaving the country because sort of like Ukraine, where not necessarily the war engulfs the entire country, but it's made things so unbearable to the point where your best option is just to leave.
right. It's not quite like El Salvador and Nicaragua in the '80s, but yeah, it's fourth gen, not third gen. So, anyways, so that's the other contradiction that COVID has done. And of course, you could also talk about how, in some respects, America still has this kind of more. When I say federal, I don't mean in a sense central power, but where each state has a certain amount of power, a certain amount of independent decision making that they can enact.
Yeah, a lot of domestic affairs are left to governors and state legislatures because of the nature of a global empire. I mean, not that the federal government doesn't have anything to do with internal lives. In my opinion, they have way too much. But again, a lot of it is delegated to the state governments, just as sort of a more managerial position than anything. But I think
Yeah.
that covers all we have for Trump's tango with the Grim Reaper. But with that being said, I suppose Belarus, Lukashenko endures once more, and the Union State seems ever closer. Now, there hasn't been any more substantive treaty on it, but again, you haven't heard much out of the protests of Belarus. The attention is completely dissipated for that. Now, I know there's protests still going on, there's stuff still going on, but again, nobody really cares anymore that Lukashenko is this evil dictator who needs to be toppled by a socially progressive women and gay coalition revolution. And I think that boils down to, again, as I said, the focus now in terms of the former Soviet Union is with Armenia and Azerbaijan, which we'll get to in a couple minutes here. But I think Belarus showed that there isn't really enough in this country for us to put it in. I think it's like Ukraine in the sense that once Russia took Crimea, Ukraine became pretty much worthless beyond its farmlands, which Germany and the IMF really got to pillage. But Belarus didn't even have that. They didn't have any valuable ports. They have, I would say, decent farmland, but compared to Ukraine, absolutely not. We're to the point where nobody really cares. You hear Merkel and Macron say something about it every once in a while. The State Department doesn't care. Pompeo was really going hard on that every once in a while, but I think what we've seen, at least the first wave of protests in Belarus, have died down. The establishment in Belarus stayed loyal to Lukashenko, whereas the disloyalty of the establishment in Ukraine led to the overthrow of Yanukovych. You want to go back even further, the disloyalty of the establishment in communist Romania led to the overthrow of Ceausescu. Whenever one of these color revolutions or coups succeed, it's because there's elements within the government, within the elite of that country, that want a change themselves. And it seems like
Yes.
Belarus, Lukashenko either has the loyalty or the fear of the Belarusian elite to the point where he weathered, he endured. And I'm sure that's in, no smart part thanks to Russia. I'm sure that played a role eventually, enormously. But
Yeah.
like I said, for now, it looks like he's safe. Now, we could see 6 months from now they decide to pick this up again. Time will tell.
Right. We shouldn't forget that Yanukovych, he was reelected twice. So, sorry, he was elected twice, and
Virtually unheard of for a Ukrainian president, mind you.
right, right, and so he emphatically said no to the EU, and that he signed on to an economic pact with Russia and other Eurasian countries. I think that even included Belarus, and that's when everything basically, you know, blew up. Um, of course, that was on the table. It was already known that he would do that. So it shouldn't have been a surprise. But that's basically when America's involvement really started to ratchet things up. And then you have, mid-February, when 41 people were shot, and these snipers are picking people off. Oddly enough, on both sides. So besides the gunfire exchange between protesters and you know any of the military police factions. But of course, violence was going on long before that. In any case, with Belarus, this week we saw Lukashenko drive out all foreign press, and you literally have to do this. You literally have to do this because the neutral position, like in the current world, isn't having to stick by ideas about liberal democracies, because liberal democracies run the world, right? You can't play that game. You're going to lose that game. So yeah, you boot out all these all the foreign press, and notice how it's really like, except for Twitter, you don't see very much on the news anymore. And like you say, it can't uptick again, but they have no access now. And so we're not going to hear that much about Belarus. Sanctions are, being written up. There's something like 40 countries involved. But no, not 40 countries. There's about 40 individuals in Lukashenko's administration, in basically the power structure of Belarus, who are going to be sanctioned, but not Lukashenko himself. And so obviously this is being enacted in order to drive a wedge, and this is what you would expect in a color revolution. And then later, if that doesn't work, then there'll be sanctions placed on him, or perhaps sanctions placed on certain companies. But the thing is Belarus is a very centralized economy, and it's highly dependent on Russia. Uh, that makes it a little bit more different than Ukraine. Ukraine was more independent than Belarus is. Not to mention, Ukraine is a much larger country with a bigger population
And many more
and
resources for when that play
many
that
more
economy.
resources, and also, frankly, more separation, more distinction, more groups that didn't get along. Uh, so or saw themselves belonging to a different civilization. Uh,
Yeah, the stark contrast between Western Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine. I'm sure I don't need to tell
yeah,
anyone in the audience
yeah,
about that, but yeah, you have the much more Russian East, the much more, I guess you could say, um, Galician West, more from the
yeah.
culture of like Poland and the Carpathians, whatever. But whereas
These people who basically belong to the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
yeah, and that's compared to Belarus, which, despite the fact that there is a Belarusian identity, it's very, I would say, closely intertwined to the Russian identity. If I want to give a Western example, it says, okay, so the Russians are the English, the Ukrainians are the Irish, whereas the Belarusians are like the Welsh.
Yeah. Now, I mean, if there was a real serious patriotic front in Belarus, we would have seen bloodshed by now. We would not see 6, 7 weekends in a row of women protesting
Yeah,
with flowers.
that's what accelerated Ukraine, because there was a genuine Ukrainian nationalist movement. Now, of course, they ended up serving the interests of more subversive elements. But point being is, there were the people who again, were probably the closest thing in the modern age to actual neo Nazis that we've seen, and they were willing to take up arms. They were willing to be violent. That's why you have the fighting in eastern Ukraine. At least it's especially very heavy back in the back a few years ago, 2014, 2015. But in Belarus, there isn't that, and because again, there isn't that sort of ultranationalist or quote unquote neo-Nazi ring. Now, of course, there were the people larping with the Stahlhelms and the swastika banners, or the collaborationist banners. But I mean, of course, you're going to have that, but none of them took up arms. None of them even were violent in terms of riots. What we had again, it devolved into a bunch of shrieking women. Quite literally, at the end of the day, that's all the Belarusian protest devolved into.
And they don't even shriek the way American women do. I mean, it's not even that.
Yeah,
It's literally
it was like I was actually looking at actual women and not these horrid mutants you find in Portland.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, they had some libs, from Moscow who showed up to protest with them. But a lot of Belarusian libs, especially, I forget whether it was the Guardian who did a piece on this. Really, the same kind of weirdo people with like tattoos,
Yeah, all the
piercing,
all the exiles in
stuff
Poland.
embedded
That
in their
yeah,
anatomy.
that was a trip to say the least.
Yeah, yeah. It just makes you root for Lukashenko. Like you just want him to crush these people. So, anyways, yeah, there isn't much wedge room. Like I don't see the West trying to create an insurrection, the kind that we saw in Ukraine, because there's no basis for it. If anything, if they were really, really desperate, if Belarus really means this much to the West, they would have to, support some kind of, I don't know, the Polish minority in the west of Belarus, or something on the border to create havoc. That's really their only option.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to go from the ethnic or religious angles where they talk about the oppressed Polish minority, the oppressed Catholic minority, or similar to what we see in Ukraine, really prop up a schismatic church, saying, "Oh, they're they have nothing to do with the Russians. They're not in community with each other. They're strong, independent, and they stand alone and stand for Belarusian nationalism." So they'd have to play on the angles they played in Ukraine because liberal revolution is not picking up any traction. It hardly picks up any traction in the West at this point, at least. Now, of course, there's always the overarching liberalism, but in a former Soviet country, probably the most former Soviet country out of all the former Soviet Union, it picks up absolutely zero traction.
Yeah, it's not there, and I think it's going to be hard to tell what happens, in the future. And a lot of this does depend on Russia and does depend on Putin, because, well, here's what I mean. Russia is basically safest when it has a mission, right? Like I think what Putin did for Russia was, yes, he saved her literally from fracturing even further, out of the worst economic disaster in centuries. Um, as many people died of one thing or another over this 10-year period as some of the worst periods in Russian history. And of course, tens of thousands of people left. I mean, hundreds of thousands. They left because it was basically, unsafe, and
Yeah, it was honestly an ironic inverse of the early days of the Bolshevik Revolution from 1917 to 1922. It was like witnessing the same thing all over again, except from a mirrored perspective.
right, right. And even with Western involvement, what do you know? So, I think Putin's policies are still, there's a good chunk of them, and it's taken a long time to move away from them, but a good chunk of them are part of this kind of neoliberal interpretation of how everybody's going to get along in the world, like how Russia is going to interface with neoliberalism. right? And how that's going to work. Now, to some extent, what probably supports this point of view is Russia coming out of the economic disaster of the 90s. In a way, you could substantiate the argument why Russia should go along that path. But I don't think it's the heart of Russia, right? Like people don't generally want to work in service industries in Russia, right? Um, Russia did not have this extended period moving from agriculture, into industry and then into service sector jobs. Literally, all of this happened in 100 years. What took other countries 3 times as long. So I think like it, for what happens to Belarus depends on what Russia does. Belarus is not an independent state. It can't be any more than Ukraine can really be an independent state.
You
You
know,
know,
or
in the
Armenia or
full
Azerbaijan for that matter.
yeah, in the full sense. And so if Russia feels that if Russia has a mission, then it's safe because that mission is really what drives them more so than just economic well-being, higher standard of living. Those are universal concerns. I understand that, and I know Russians personally who will tell me that. I get that, right? But Russia isn't going to be stronger just because of that. It can't do it on that,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
complacency is death for a nation. And, I mean, you're talking about Russia in particular, but any nation that doesn't have a goal or a vision for the future will stagnate and will die eventually. I think that's a large part of what's happening in the West. Like, even under the harsh days of the Bush era neoconservatism, there was a vision, a horrible vision, but a vision no less. China, love them, hate them, whatever you think of the Chinese Communist Party and their vision for the One Belt and One Road, or their vision for Hong Kong, Taiwan, they have an idea. They have a goal in mind. Can you say the same about the United States? Can you say the same about, okay, maybe Macron does, but France's entire nation, Germany's entire nation, the UK's entire nation? At the end of the day, even if a goal is muddled, even if it's a bad goal, you're you're getting somewhere.
Right. The other problem is there isn't enough distinction between foreign and domestic um, truths or missions, right? Like when I'm talking about like a country when it has a mission or Russia has a mission, right? Every time it is held on to some kind of a mission, it has either had to use an economy in order to achieve the mission. So the economy isn't the mission, right? Or in spite of not having an economy, it is still manages somehow to remain true to whatever particular mission is there at that time, right? That is what um, emboldens them. That is what gives them reason to fight. Like, say what you will, but of the Axis forces, 8 out of 10, they all died on the Eastern Front. They didn't die on the Western Front. 8 out of 10, 80% is huge. No other country would have lost as much and not given up.
Yeah, and this is probably just due to the proximity of that part of the world, but um, the two other countries that sustained the proportion of losses were both Hungary and Romania, who again were Axis powers. And I don't know, it just must be something about that Central Eastern Europe and the sort of. But I think what you're saying particularly applies to Russia. Can the point I'm getting at is it applies to a lot of other nations, if not all nations. But yeah, I ultimately agree with you that if again Russia doesn't have a goal, if their goal is just economic growth or standard of living, like again, those things are desirable, those things are necessary for a lot of the goals you want to achieve, but they should be viewed as tools, as means rather than an end. Sort of,
Right.
sort of like my,
And
my
this,
personal view on a career. Like your career should not be your goal; it should be the vehicle to get to your goal, and that's how a
right.
nation should view its economy.
Right. And when you look at American foreign policy, what is it? It's an elaboration on the domestic policy that is there to be spread all over the world. Whether it's gay acceptance, or whether it's consumerism. It's always going to be one of those two: LGBTQ, women, and the economy. There's no difference, right? And so all that it's America's mission is literally to make you an American, right? But being an American is really about, you know, quasi ideas about personal freedom and, enjoying the good life. It's not really that much of a mission. However, a lot of Americans think that's a mission. That's a legitimate mission. A lot of, diehard EU supporters and I mean of the liberal sort, the Remoaners, around Brexit, for instance. To them, that is a mission. That is actually a noble mission, right? Um, as crazy as that sounds, and I think one of the reasons why it's not really working out for the West is its mission is banal. It's incredibly banal.
Yeah, I mean, compare that to even 100 years ago, the mission of the British Empire. Now, that was a spread of British values, in which one of those was liberalism, and I'd say a main one was liberalism, but it wasn't the sole thing. It wasn't the primary thing. They were, like again, just British culture, British religion, such as the Anglican
Yeah,
Church. They wanted to spread all these things. They wanted to build infrastructure in these countries. But yeah, liberalism was a value, but it was not the value.
right. And their understanding of liberalism, of course, was the liberalism that arose after the Protestant Catholic wars that had raged in the country for a century, off and on. And basically, liberalism was a truce, and it was, I mean, one side won basically,
Yeah,
but
I
it
mean,
was
there was
a
also a
kind of
very aristocratic system where us enlightened elites will take care of you plebs. So again, it was just a new spin on the old um, dynamics of ruling elites and the people.
right, right. And so Anglicanism was there. They felt that they should spread the gospel to all the four corners of the earth. Hospitals, trains. I'm not saying that that bad things didn't happen, or that bad things weren't intentionally done. They were. Every empire, every civilization has this checkered past, this checkered history. That's not what I'm talking about, right? Um, I'm talking about the goal itself, right? And America's goal is extremely banal. There's no transcendence in it at all whatsoever. Um, it's basically a meme, right? And so you see European markets, struggling to rejuvenate themselves. You see, all kinds of challenges, like you know this. I forget which index now. There's several. Uh, what's the term for it? I forget the term, but in Asia, for instance, the yuan has been added to at least like as another reserve currency along with the American reserve currency. The Shanghai Agreement, right, is also encouraging other local countries in Asia and in Russia to not use the American dollar. Russia has jettisoned 96% of the American debt, the American dollar in its transactions. China is already buying and selling oil in the yuan, right? And I would say before the end of 2021, you're going to really see that accelerate, and that's really going to chip in, um, you know, um, the lifestyle of Americans. And they don't have like a really strong message right now that's going to unify America or why America should run the world.
Yeah, what was Trump's entire messaging for the first half of pretty much his presidency up until COVID? It was greatest
The economy,
economy in history, black unemployment, women's unemployment. Look at all these jobs we've created. That was
economy, everything's the economy. It's bankrupt. And then when things do get bankrupt, it's going to be really bad. So, I mean, I've steered way off course, but what I'm saying
But
is
I
that,
think that actually makes up for some of the lost time because I was scraping the bottom of the barrel for topics here. So I think this brief segment about Belarus turned out very well.
yeah. So, anyways, Belarus's hope lies in Russia, and Russia's hope lies in a mission, in a mission that's not banal.
Yeah,
And, you know,
yeah, like somehow the Chinese communists have a more fruitful mission than Western neoliberalism, which I thought I'd never see the day, but here we are, I guess.
yes.
But with that, keeping with former Soviet news, before we move into Armenia and Azerbaijan, there's been some riots in Kyrgyzstan. Now, I haven't exactly pinpointed what's going on. Now, it's important to keep in mind in the past 15 years, they've overthrown two presidents, very much like a Ukraine style situation where they're never really satisfied with their government. But they've attacked Russian owned businesses, they've attacked Turkish and Chinese invested mines. So it's pretty much just been an indiscriminate sort of protest against anything they can get their hands on. So I haven't exactly pegged down what's going on there. Now, according to some Russians I know, which again, take it with a grain of salt, and some of the media sources I've seen, they're actually not that big. It's something that's more brewing right now. But I just want to say before we move on to Armenia and Azerbaijan, keep your eye on Kyrgyzstan. That could be the next one. That's been at the pivot between Chinese investment, Russian influence, Turkish investment, and of
Yeah.
course, it's very close to Afghanistan. It doesn't border. Tajikistan is between them and Afghanistan, but it's still within that Central Asian region that the United States is clinging onto for dear life. So Kyrgyzstan might be
Yeah.
the next big, big flashpoint in all of this. But oh boy, onto the Caucasus. Um, things have not been honestly doing that good for Armenia. Their southern front has not been the best. Turkey has continued to move in more fighters, and there were reports on Sunday. Now, I don't think these panned out, of course, but that the southern front of Armenia completely collapsed, and now we're seeing the movement of Russian mercenaries into Armenia, and there's serious discussion of Russia getting involved in some official capacity as we speak. Now, how much that involvement will be, I don't know, but point being is it's escalated a lot since last week and a lot more than I thought. Israel said about a day ago, we're going to cut off the Predator drones we send to Azerbaijan in about a day or so. We're going to give them some time to think it over. So there's been that. Uh, it seems like every country has been casting their lot. The West has treaded lightly. The United States has played the tightrope. France has, again, as I said, pledged support for Armenia to some degree. But it seems like a lot of the fighters that were in Syria, whether they be Syrian-backed, Turkish-backed Syrian forces, or the various jihadists there, or even the Russian PMCs, are being moved to the Caucasus right now. So this is being come a lot more than I originally anticipated it would be. And you now have Georgia wanting to get more involved. Georgia taking very anti-Armenian stances, which again, you can see why that's happening. Of course, the Rose Revolution, all of that. Their outstanding disputes with Russia over Abkhazia and South Ossetia. But we're seeing what I thought was just going to be another brief skirmish. We saw this during the summer. We saw this in 2016. We saw this in the 90s, where they would come to some clunky truce and kick the can down the road for another decade. But no, at least for now. Now, it could as casualties mount, both sides might come to their senses and sign a clunky peace deal. But for now, it looks like the only place it's going is up. The only place it's going is escalation.
Yes, and just to give some background to Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. So this is a disputed region. I guess most of our listeners know there was a war in 1994. The vast majority of people living in Nagorno-Karabakh are actually Armenian, but it's technically not part of Armenia. However, you can well imagine how close the ties are. Um, you know, Shortly after the war in Ukraine, went cold. There's always flashpoints and stuff like that going on, but it's generally cold. and it has been for over 5 years. However, um, around 2016 to 2017, and even into 2018, there was a very concerted effort by the West to begin influencing a lot of these other former Soviet states. There was an attempted color revolution in Moldova, which essentially failed. And there was a sustained effort in uh, Armenia, which had basically a win. Now, it's not the outright win that the West would want. Armenia's ties with Russia is still quite strong.
Yeah, Armenia is in
Russia
what we
has,
call, I would say, a basket case government where you have a lot of positions like the prime minister loyal to people like Soros, to the, again, Western establishment, but you still have a lot of very pro-Russian, again, former Soviet Union ties within the government. For example, within the administration, bureaucracy. I think even the president, which again, it functions in one of those president prime minister systems, is more on the pro-Russian side. So again, Armenia is what happens when a color revolution starts but never finishes, to the point where you get this very disjointed government.
right, right. And in 2018, there were protests. There were Armenian protests against Russia, both in Armenia and in Russia. Calling Russia a dictatorship and Putin's a tyrant. Blah blah blah. On and on. I mean, a lot of this was Western sponsored, and of course, there is a trope. Armenians, as soon as they leave Armenia, are no longer like based in traditional. They become very decadent and liberal, and so on. And so, Russia has pragmatic interests in Armenia. I don't know how strong they are, and I don't know if Russia really feels that Armenia is an absolute necessity for it.
Well, I agree, but I think what may push them to that point is not so much the value of Armenia, but so much the value of keeping Turkish backed fighters off their doorstep. That's the primary concern of Iran right now. That's why they've been so pro Armenia. And I think if Turkey continues to press its luck, it's only a matter of time before Russia gets involved. Not necessarily for the sake of defending strategic interests in Armenia, but for the sake of keeping these people out of the Caucasus again.
Yeah, okay, that's possible. It's possible Dagestan, it could flare up. It's possible even the Chechens. It's possible. It's possible. I don't think it's that probable. The way if I was Russia, the way I would see it is you have the younger generation that more and more doesn't want you there, and many of them, if they can leave Armenia. And so you're going to protect them to have what? To have a government that's partly under Soros, partly under the West. You're going to save their ass. If you win, what do you get out of it? If you want to increase Russian ties, and ostensibly it would be a Russia that's more Russia than it was 2 years ago because of the changes that were put in place in the Russian constitution. This is setting a course for Russia. So what's the advantage? In a way, Armenia kind of put itself in this spot.
Yeah, that's I think that's the point actually our good friend and two-time guest File Varangian made, that maybe if Armenia didn't throw itself in the color revolution, didn't try to coup itself into the Western sphere, that they would be more Russian support, that there would be more likely to have Russian support in this conflict. But you make a good point. You have a younger generation, especially the ones who go abroad, who have no connection with Armenia. They don't hold to the oldest Christian country in the world. Most of them become atheistic, or if not outright anti-religious, or more specifically anti-Christian. But that's beside the point. And again, you have pretty much very little strategic interest for a population that's going to be ungrateful, if not outright hostile towards you. So I would say I completely understand Russia's moves to stay relatively non-aligned in this conflict for now. And look, like I said, we'll probably see more of this. Them sending more private contractors like they did in Syria, and again, military advisors. Which I'm pretty sure there's already military advisors on the ground there. I know there's definitely Iranian ones, which again, that's the Iranian thing is a very odd dynamic, but I think it boils down to preventing Turkey from getting a foothold in Azerbaijan, which I believe Iran is probably much more concerned about than Russia is. Not that Russia isn't concerned about that, but honestly,
Yeah, I mean, because Russia has good ties with Azerbaijan,
yeah. But
right? And that great pipeline that was supposed to begin from the Caspian Sea, go across the Caucasus into the Black Sea. I mean, it's been 30 years,
yeah, and you know,
right? Uh, so Russia's not threatened by that, and Russia has good standing with both of them. I can say, like on the ground level, the public in Russia, yeah, they prefer Armenians over Azerbaijanis, right? It's true. It's true. They're also more likely to intermarry with them. However, they also feel betrayed, and Russia has a history of helping out small states that later turned their back on
you mean like Georgia and Ukraine?
them.
uh,
Yeah, there's others, but I've spoken to several Russians years before this recent conflict, even the previous conflict that happened about 2 years ago, which didn't last very long. Their Russians are kind of tentative about like getting involved unless it's absolutely necessary. There's quite a few Russians, not because they're liberals, but because they don't feel like getting burned by helping out some small states that will later betray them anyways.
yeah,
Or
it's sort of the lie that Americans got caught up in with Iraq and Afghanistan. You'll be greeted as liberators, but you get there and the people they just detest you. They outright hate you. Now, I would say in terms of Russian intervention in its own backyard versus American intervention across the world, one of those is clearly more justified than the other. But again, the point stands that you're intervening and putting your country's economy on the line, your country's soldiers on the line, for people who ultimately will not repay the favor in any way.
right, right. So that's sort of the Russia angle from it. But as far as Armenia, as far as I know, has not formally declared war, and that they are sending volunteers into Nagorno-Karabakh, and um, and I'm sure there's more involvement than what's there on the surface. The casualties are sounding like they're high, although both sides are claiming like extraordinary casualties. Like in the thousands upon thousands, like literally within a week. That said, it looks like the edge is on Azerbaijan's side. And yeah, Turkey is helping them. There was a base that was bombed by Armenia that apparently had Turkish F-16s. They are F-16s. Are they Turkish? I don't know. But I saw another report today saying that they are Turkish. So who knows? One thing we do know is that Erdogan is bringing his jihadists from Idlib into you know into this contested region between Armenia and Azerbaijan. That's for sure. In fact, a few dozen have already been killed. Um, they've compared, photos of these guys both in Idlib and there. But hey, I mean, I think they're offered something like $1,000 a month, and for them, that goes a very long way.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the life of the mercenary. The money's not so much for you, rather than the people in your life. That I mean, because you obviously can't enjoy it once you're dead, but I mean, there's people who can, like your family can use it, whatever. But my ultimate prediction for this conflict is, even though it's gotten pretty hot, things have gotten pretty nasty and deadly. That I think it's going to get to a point where both sides look at the casualty numbers. They're going to look at all the body bags that come back and say, is it really worth it? And probably kick the can down the road for just a few more years. Now, I could be wrong, but based on the previous conflicts, the one about 4 years ago, the one in the 90s, the one just this summer. It looks like the direction's going. I think we're hitting our peak right now with it, and it's going to start to go downhill in the coming weeks.
I mean, I hope so because I mean, Azerbaijan wants that region back, but the vast majority of the people are not Azerbaijanis. And so what are you going to do with them? I mean, are you going to genocide them? Are you going to force them to leave? Right? Like, it's not realistic, right? Those are the simple facts. Azerbaijanis are an absolute minority in that region. And um,
Yeah, if you want something to put it in comparison, just for our audience here, there's more Serbs in Kosovo than there are Azeris in this region, to the point where like it would be more worth it for Serbia to try to retake Kosovo its entirely than Armenia to try to win this war in its entirety.
right, or um, Nagorno-Karabakh is more Armenian than Crimea is Russian.
Yeah, that's another really good way of putting it. But I mean, just the last point I'm going to make, and I know this is probably going to just be preaching to the choir for a lot of our audience, and not really, again, a practical solution to this conflict, but this just shows what the era of nation states has. Fighting over these border disputes over mixed ethnic areas. For these people who lived, I would say, I don't want to say peace, but a relative peace for centuries under the borders and under the jurisdiction of the same empire or empires. Both these countries were part of the Russian Empire. Before that, they were part of the Persian Empire. And now, with the era of nation states, self determination for all people, it leads to these fruitless conflicts over. Look at the size of the patch of this land on the map. It's that little area in red with all the blue and yellow clusters right around. No, yeah, I understand. You do sometimes have to put your life on the line. You do have to fight. You do have to dedicate your nation's resources in a war to achieve what you want. And I understand, honestly, both sides. Now, again, I'm more sympathetic to the Armenian side with this, but at the end of the day, the sort of world order we created facilitates conflicts like this. And look, you could say this is better than the major conflicts, but you can either have a major conflict once or twice every generation, or you could have just these perpetual slow burning conflicts all across the world, in Azerbaijan, in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in uh, Asia, in Southeast Asia. They're still fighting in Southeast Asia. In Latin America with Venezuela, more appropriately. In Central America with the cartels. That's not exactly the same, but you can have all these little perpetual conflicts, and that's sort of the consequence of this world order. Now, again, I don't think that's changing anytime soon, but I don't know. I view Armenia and Azerbaijan as the quintessential 21st century
Mhm.
conflict. These two newly independent states that lived under the borders of, again, the same empires for centuries, in relative peace. Now, again, that was very, harshly enforced peace, whether that be by the Persians, whether that be by the Russian troops or later Soviet troops. But you have these two independent nations going head to head, while also appealing to the rest of the world to fight their battle for them.
Right. And, the other thing too that should be said about small states is, sometimes these small states can be vitriolic, they can be obnoxious, but a lot of that, in a sense, has to be that way because they wouldn't preserve their identity if they didn't. They have to puff themselves up, literally, in order. I mean, I'm one of those people. I come from an incredibly small group of people dispersed. That there's more of us living outside than within the country proper. And so I understand, like I completely understand this sense of identity and this way of thinking in order to protect that identity, right? Um, Going forward, how could this, like, maybe there has to be a kind of obviously there's a dialectic here that's being formed from like the prior agricultural medieval world and then the modernized mechanized world bleeding into the neoliberal world. These countries are not. ever going to be independent, no matter how much they want to be independent, right? The point is to, I suppose the point is to have a certain amount of empathy for the need for them to protect that identity, and at the same time for them to understand that they can't survive without this cooperation of much larger entities. And so some kind of balance is going to have to be struck, where their identity is not going to be eroded, but at the same time, in a sense, they have to know their place.
Yeah, I think more and more small nations are coming to these conclusions as as you put it, Pax Americana is starting to wane and erode. Because before this, I mean, the 2000 United States, especially the 1990s United States, could step in and pretty much mediate any conflict. Now, how good that mediation was, how long it lasted, up for debate, but they could come to a peace agreement within a relatively short amount of time. Could you imagine if the United States today, Trump today, tried to step in here and say, "Oh, we can negotiate something. Let's make a deal here." It wouldn't fly the same. And we're seeing, as again we descend into a more multipolar world, that these small states are learning how. Again, a lot of these countries are sovereign for the first time in centuries, if not for the first time ever, and I would say are still learning to navigate the world. And it's taken a lot of time to understand that we don't wield the same influence as the great powers of the world, despite the fact that on paper we're all just sovereign nation states. And like you said, I think they're still learning their place, and I think this is going to be a decades, if not centuries long endeavor.
Yeah,
But with that, speaking of statelets, I wouldn't really call it a statelet, but smaller countries learning their place in the world. Let's finish out with Syria. So, of course, there has been a resurgence of ISIS fighters to the point where, in some parts of eastern Syria, as you can see on the map, that little place with the money bag, ISIS is still collecting taxes from the locals. There's still been fighting in eastern Syria with both coalition forces and ISIS, and of course government and Russian forces with ISIS. But what the main news I saw out of this was number one, Idlib. Things are really starting to heat up again there. Things are picking up there again, and Turkey has decided to launch an entirely new offensive against the Kurds. They've been hammering them. You can see in northern Syria, they've been attacking YPG, SDF positions all across northern Syria, even in Idlib, even in Afrin, which, again, that was one of the areas that calmed down for a while. American patrols are still in the country. I haven't heard any reports this week of them being chased around by Syrian or Russian patrols, but I'm sure we're due for that again some other time, or perhaps everyone's distracted with everything else going on. But I would say three big stories out of Syria, like I said, resurgence of ISIS in the east to the point where again, they still have jurisdiction over a town where they can collect taxes. The hammering of the Kurds in the north by Turkey, which again just shows Turkey's how proactive they're being with their foreign policy and how much wind they seemingly have behind their sails, and the ever so slow conquest of Idlib. And honestly, this is the smallest on the map Idlib has ever been. Now, it's important to make a distinction between the two kind of greens, because the green in the very northern area along the border of Turkey is Afrin. That's Turkish-backed forces. But when it comes to HTS yeah, they're still going by HTS, right? They change names so often. I know they used to be Al Sham, but that little green sliver kind of looks like a crescent. This is the smallest it has been since the start of the war. This is the most
yeah,
closing in. They're closing in to the point where the name of Idlib on the map is covered with these little activity dots that this website gives. And that's how intense the fighting has been. Like I said last week, like I said the few weeks before, I think they're going really hard at this because they realize the media attention is on COVID, it's on the election, it's on a lot of the other things going on, for example, in Belarus, in Armenia, to the point where Syria, for the first time in almost 10 years, is now a secondary story in the newspapers. Nobody cares.
yeah.
And again, after three quote unquote gas attacks, the third one didn't generate any international attention. I think it's gotten to the point where the government forces, the Russian forces, and of course the various other forces that are supporting Assad see this very narrow window of opportunity just to push in and end it. And to the point where I wouldn't say by the end of this year, but maybe by the beginning of next year, especially considering the way things go with Turkey and where their priorities shift between Libya and the Caucasus, we could see Idlib fall. Now, like I said, I don't think it'll
Yeah.
be during this year, but 2021. And I think there's also a a big rush depending on the presidential election because Trump, despite his few strikes, has been relatively not interventionist in Syria. But Biden, I don't think it would get fully involved in Syria, but I think a Biden administration would want to prevent a complete collapse of this little front in Idlib and would be willing to use more substantive force than what was used by the Trump administration. So that could also be part of the rush, trying to get it in before January 2021, before Biden potentially takes office. And it'll be interesting to see the actions after Election Day, what Syria does, depending on who the winner is, or depending on when we figure out when the winner is, because it is very disputed with, well, how long will it take to count the mail in ballots? How long will it take to decide the winner of the election? But I think once we have a winner of the election, which will probably be sometime between Election Day and late November, we will either see a rapid acceleration into Idlib or rapid deceleration into a stagnation in Idlib.
Yes, and I mean, I don't know what's the number of deaths occurring in Idlib right now, but most of the deaths I'm seeing are actually happening in central eastern Syria, also in East Hama. In 1 week, 41 Syrian soldiers have been killed or wounded. I think killed actually. Uh, ISIS is getting money, and if ISIS is getting money in that area of Syria, there is a good chance that America is behind it. And there's a good chance for sure that the Gulf states are also, the Gulf states are definitely behind it anywhere in Syria, right? But I think America makes a distinction that they don't want Syria bothering the Kurds, and they don't want ISIS bothering the Kurds, and they don't want ISIS muddling things up in Idlib. But as for the rest of Syria, America and the Gulf states and even Israel, they're completely fine with them attacking Syrians there. I don't know if I've ever seen Americans actually attack ISIS fighters in that region along the Euphrates
I think
when
they've
they
only
threaten
ever
Kurds.
defended
Yes,
SDF controlled areas. I don't think, because again, there were troops deployed to engage an ISIS uprising, but I think that was to defend these SDF controlled oil fields.
right, right. But if we're talking about that big green patch that America has, control over in eastern Syria, any Syrian that goes in there to try to fight and kill ISIS is going to die
Yeah, that's their wedge along the
because the Americans
Jordanian
will
and
kill them.
Iraqi border, and
Yeah.
that's sort of the zone of control there. It's where a lot of the training camps are, especially the ones operated by the Jordanians, and again by extension by I can't remember whether the I think that one is through the CIA
Hey,
that patch
Qatar.
there, whereas the a lot of the Pentagon activities in northern Syria. So yeah, right there is sort of the no-go zone because again they're letting Idlib fall before them. I'm surprised the media isn't really hammering Trump for this. Oh, he's allowing genocide in Idlib, like how they did in Aleppo when they really put pressure on Obama,
Yeah,
saying
yeah,
Obama he's allowing the gay bakeries and the hospitals and the children's centers to be blown up in Idlib. The last hospital of Aleppo just got blown up. How many times did you hear that throughout 2016? Throughout the entire year. I mean, how many last hospitals does this place have? And
yeah,
again, virtually
yeah.
radio silence from the American media and Western media as a whole when it comes to this. I would say at this point, the best word to describe it, relentless assault on Idlib. This is more action than we've seen in years. Again, this is
Hmm.
rapid, and considering the amount, I haven't heard that much from Syrian losses, and this is through Southfront, this is through Sana and these other Syrian affiliated news sources. You haven't heard that much out of it, and or even from Turkish news sources, which would want to demoralize the Syrians. You haven't again. So it must be that either the casualties are relatively low, or they are just going for a hell march to put an end to this once and for all. Now I would say the casualties are probably pretty low, but it looks like they're not playing any games anymore, and that this is their final chance. This is their window to crush Idlib. And I think that has to also do with a lot of Turkish disengagement. Perhaps there was a deal struck behind closed doors with Russia and Turkey. I don't know. Because there were
Yeah.
meetings. Actually, I didn't get many details on it, but there were, again, Syria meetings, Libya meetings between Russia, I think France and the UK, and Turkey. So maybe there was some sort of backdoor deal struck to the point where, yeah, wipe out Idlib. We have bigger concerns in Libya and the Caucasus now. So
Hmm.
at the end of the
Hmm.
day, this is probably the most Syrian nukes we've had in what, months?
Yeah. I mean, I think in many ways, the West was really deflated after the Russians and the Syrians recaptured Aleppo. I think that was it. It was. I remember just the panic and the efforts and what's the name of that stupid little girl that was tweeting from?
Bana Alabed, the 8-year-old Syrian girl who's been 8 years old for the
That's
past
right,
14
Ben.
years. Yeah,
That's right. That's right. Remember that tweet? It's better that we have World War III than let Aleppo fall. It's like, I don't think so.
yeah, and then it
No,
turns
it's
out her
not.
father is like literally a member of Al Qaeda who beheaded a child.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Like,
know. It's just
this is the kind of
and of
stuff we're
course
dealing with.
Erdogan, and of course Erdogan, like is friend. He greets them. He treats them like heroes, and I mean that was all optics, right? Like,
Yeah,
I mean maybe he's sincere, but
but
those are the early days of Ottoman building.
oh yes, of course. Good old, Erdogan Pasha, the Neo-Ottoman Empire, based on the hopes and concerns of one 8-year-old girl who's allegedly from Idlib and has been eight. Again, that's been around since 2016. She should be like 12 by now. And I'm curious to check on the account to see if they've updated the picture, or updated the profile, or anything
Uh,
about like this kid actually getting older, because I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know, and this of course become the running joke anytime there's anything in the world. Help me, Mr. Donald Trump, and I'm an 8-year-old girl in Venezuela, in Iran, wherever. But on our end, by the time we're recording this, the vice presidential debate is about to start, and I want to watch the
Yeah.
lightning storm over Salt Lake City, as they call it. So we'll probably do some short review of that. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind yet. But again, if it's let me put it this way: if it's interesting enough, we'll definitely do some sort of
Yeah.
review of it, some sort of summary of it. But if it's going to go the way I think it is, which is probably just going to be a normal debate beyond people shrieking about Mike Pence, we're probably not going to cover it beyond a brief segment next episode.
Yeah.
But that's a wrap for this week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Let me know how the new recording software and everything sounds. See you guys next time,
Sounds good.
and goodbye.
Take care.